He looked me right in the eye and called me financially irresponsible. Yeah, me. Little did I know, that accusation? It was just a smokescreen, a perfectly crafted deflection from a secret so massive it was about to blow up our entire lives. He said, I didn't get how money worked. Turns out, I didn't get who he was. For 15 years, I really thought we were a team, a partnership. He was the numbers guy, MBA, always talking confidently about investments and our long-term plans. I was a nurse, working part-time, raising our 3 kids, and I trusted him completely with our financial future. It made sense, right? He knew that stuff. I knew scraped knees, fevers, and endless school plays. We had our roles, our lanes, or at least, that's what I thought. I never second-guessed how he handled the bills, the accounts, or the big picture he painted for our retirement. Why would I? He was my husband, the man I promised to build a life with. That life, I'd soon find out, was built on a pile of lies, a carefully hidden mess of debt and deceit. The illusion of our financial stability, and honestly, our whole marriage, was about to come crashing down. It started, like these things often do, with something small, almost nothing. A credit card statement showed up in the mail. It was addressed only to him, from a bank I didn't recognize. A little flicker of, not suspicion, not then, more like, what's this? That evening, I brought it up, super casual, expecting a simple answer. Maybe it was a new card for his business, or an old account he'd forgotten about. Instead of a calm explanation, I got indignation, pure, unadulterated offense. This is my account, he said, his voice all tight. Why are you going through my mail? I remember feeling a chill. It was just on the counter with the rest of the mail. I didn't recognize the bank, that's all. He sighed, this big, theatrical sound, like I was really testing his patience. Look, I handle the finances for a reason. You don't really get how all this works. Then he launched into this mini lecture about interest rates and credit scores, things I did understand, at least the basics, but he talked to me like I was 5. Then came the kicker. He kind of waved his hand around the room at our comfortable, but definitely not fancy, home. If it were up to you, with your little splurges, we'd be in trouble. You can be irresponsible. Irresponsible. The word just hung there, heavy and stinging. Me? The one who budgeted every grocery trip down to the penny, who hunted for sales for the kids' clothes, who tracked every cent from my part-time nursing shifts. I thought about the $5 coffees he'd sometimes roll his eyes at, or the organic apples I bought because I wanted the best for our kids. Was that what he meant? I felt this flush of anger, then a wave of hurt. That's not fair, James, I said, my voice shaking a bit. I'm careful. We've always talked about big purchases. Discussed, yes, he admitted, like he was giving me a tiny point. But the overall strategy, the big picture, that's me, and it's best you don't worry your head about it. He snatched the statement out of my hand. This is exactly why I handle the finances. You'd have us bankrupt in a year. The way he dismissed me, the condescension, it was like a punch to the gut. But more than that, it sparked something else. A tiny, nagging seed of doubt. His accusation, calling me irresponsible, it didn't just sting. It got under my skin and stayed there. For days, I kept replaying that conversation. Irresponsible? Me? It felt so wrong, so off base, that it started to feel weird, like a badly rehearsed line in a play. Why was he so defensive about one credit card statement? Why did he need to put down my understanding of money? Little things started popping into my head, things I hadn't thought twice about before, but now they seemed different, unsettling, like the times he'd get annoyed if I asked too many questions about our investments, just waving me off with, "It's complicated, don't worry about it," or how he'd always take his laptop into his study to pay bills, never at the kitchen table like we used to. I just figured he needed to concentrate, but now, it felt like he was hiding something. I remembered a few months back, a letter came that looked official, maybe from a collections agency. When I handed it to him, he went a bit pale, then quickly stuffed it into his briefcase, muttering something about a mix-up with a supplier for his little consulting side gig. He'd been cagey, dismissive. At the time, I just accepted it. Now, it felt like a piece of a puzzle I couldn't quite see. Then there was the sudden push, about a year ago, to refinance the mortgage. He said interest rates were at an all-time low, and it would save us money. I signed the papers he put in front of me. He was the expert, right? He had the MBA. But now, this cold dread started creeping in. What if his defensiveness wasn't about my supposed irresponsibility, but about something he was hiding? The thought was so alien, so not the man I thought I knew, that I tried to push it away, but it kept coming back. This nagging whisper that got louder every day. He'd always said, "I've got this." What if he didn't? That seed of doubt had definitely taken root, and it was growing, twisting my insides with anxiety. I just couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. That night, after he fell asleep, I did something I'd never ever done in our 15 years of marriage. I went into his office. My heart was hammering against my ribs. My hands were slick with nervous sweat. It felt like such a betrayal in itself, violating his privacy. But his accusation, the way he'd dismissed me, it had created this gap between us, and I just needed to understand what was on the other side. His desk was usually neat, but his briefcase was open on the floor, messier than usual. I started there, my breath catching in my throat with every rustle of paper. At first, nothing, just business receipts, old meeting notes. Then, tucked into a side pocket, I found it. Another credit card statement, from that same bank I didn't recognize. This one had a balance that made my eyes widen. It wasn't sky high, but it definitely wasn't for everyday stuff. Fueled by a mix of fear and this desperate need for the truth, I turned to his computer. He was usually so careful about logging out, but tonight, maybe because of our earlier tension, he'd left it on, just asleep. I jiggled the mouse. No password. My stomach lurched. I clicked open his browser. His email was right there. My finger hovered over the mouse. A voice was screaming at me to stop, to go back to bed, to pretend I hadn't seen anything, but I couldn't. I typed credit card into his email search bar. Dozens of emails popped up. Statements, payment confirmations, pre-approved offers, lots from accounts I knew about. But then, there were others. 1, 2, 3 more unfamiliar names. My blood ran cold. I started clicking, opening them one by one. Each click was like a tiny explosion, revealing balances, due dates, credit limits I never knew existed. Some had small balances, others were pretty big. The dates on some of these emails went back years. It wasn't just credit cards. I found emails about a personal loan I had no idea about. Then, digging through his documents folder, I stumbled on statements for a brokerage account, also just in his name. It showed a bunch of trades, many of them losses he'd never ever mentioned. The man who lectured me on being responsible with money, who prided himself on being so financially savvy, was apparently juggling a secret world of debt and risky investments. I felt dizzy, sick to my stomach. This wasn't just a forgotten account or a little embarrassing debt. This was a pattern. This was deliberate. This was a secret life, a financial double life, hidden from me, his wife, his partner. The man I thought I knew was just dissolving in front of my eyes, replaced by a stranger who just happened to look like him. The term financial infidelity wasn't in my vocabulary yet, but the weight of betrayal was already crushing me. The next few days were just a blur of secret digging. Every time James left the house, I was back in his office, like some grim detective, piecing together the fragments of our shattered financial reality. I learned to navigate his online banking portals, my hands shaking as I typed in passwords I'd guessed from his usual combinations. What I found was so much worse than I could have ever imagined. It wasn't just a few stray credit cards. I found proof of 6 credit cards I didn't know existed. 6, each with its own balance, its own horrible interest rate ticking away. Then, there was a second checking account, also a secret, and the most gut-wrenching discovery of all, a home equity line of credit, taken out against our house, our family home, the place where our children grew up, the place I thought was our sanctuary, our biggest asset. He'd leveraged it, without me knowing, without my consent. The numbers just swam before my eyes, blurring into this incomprehensible sum. I started a spreadsheet, my fingers numbly typing in the figures. When I finally hit sum, the total stared back at me from the screen, a monstrous figure that just stole the breath from my lungs. Nearly $97,000 in hidden debt. $97,000 he had piled up, managed and hidden, all while preaching to me about the cost of organic apples. The betrayal felt like a physical blow. It wasn't just about the money, though that was terrifying enough. It was the years of lies, the calculated deception. Every dream we'd shared, every conversation about our future, now felt tainted, built on this rotten foundation. The man who had called me irresponsible was the architect of a financial disaster, a secret mess that threatened to swallow us whole. I remember just sitting on his office floor, surrounded by printouts of statements, my body racked with sobs. How could he? How could the person I trusted most in the world do something so deceptive? The trust, the very bedrock of our marriage, had been systematically destroyed, one secret account, one hidden lie at a time. He hadn't just hidden debt, he had hidden a fundamental part of himself, a part of our life together. The shock was overwhelming, this cold wave of realization that nothing, absolutely nothing, was what it seemed. Our life, as I knew it, was a carefully built illusion, and it had just shattered. Armed with a folder stuffed with printouts, bank statements, credit card bills, loan agreements, I waited for James to come home. The calm I'd somehow managed to fake for days was gone, replaced by this roiling mix of anger, hurt, and a terrifying kind of resolve. When he walked in, whistling, seemingly clueless about the storm that was about to break, I just couldn't hold it in any longer. "We need to talk," I said. My voice was surprisingly steady, even though my insides were churning. He looked up from his phone, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "Can it wait? I've had a long day." "No, James, it can't." I pointed to the kitchen table, where I'd laid out all the damning evidence like a prosecutor presenting her case. "This can't wait." He saw the papers, and for the first time, a look of genuine fear crossed his face. He knew what I'd found. The bravado, the condescension from our earlier conversation, gone. "What is all this?" he blustered, but his voice had no conviction. "This," I said, my voice rising even though I was trying to control it, "is $97,000 of debt you've hidden from me. This is a home equity line of credit on our house that I never knew about. These are secret bank accounts and credit cards. What in God's name have you done, James?" He just sank into a chair, the fight completely draining out of him. At first, he tried to downplay it. "It's not as bad as it looks. I had a plan. I was going to fix it." "A plan?" I almost laughed. A harsh, broken sound. "A plan that involved lying to me for years? A plan that involved calling me financially irresponsible while you were drowning us in secret debt?" The excuses started then. A bad investment that spiraled out of control, trying to maintain a certain lifestyle, not wanting to worry me. Each excuse felt like another little betrayal. He talked about feeling pressure, about making some mistakes he thought he could fix on his own. He talked about shame, about not wanting to look like a failure, especially to me, given his financial background. "So you decided the best thing to do was to deceive me? To treat me like I was too stupid or too fragile to handle the truth?" My voice cracked. The pain of his deceit was so much deeper than the numbers on those pages. It was the profound loss of trust, the awful realization that our entire relationship had been operating under this veil he created. That confrontation was the hardest conversation of my life. There were tears, mostly mine. There were raised voices. There were long, agonizing silences. He admitted to the deceptions, bit by bit. He admitted to the lies. But the why? The why remained this gaping wound. He talked about fear of judgment, a desire for control, anxieties tied to how he grew up around money, but none of it excused the depth of the betrayal. By the end of it, I felt hollowed out, exhausted, and utterly alone, even though he was sitting right across from me. The man I married felt like a complete stranger. The days and weeks after the confrontation were just an emotional wasteland. The initial shock gave way to this tidal wave of feelings, each one more overwhelming than the last. Betrayal was the sharpest. This wasn't just about money, it was about the sanctity of our partnership, the vows we'd taken. He had created this secret world inside our marriage, and I was just an clueless outsider. How do you even begin to reconcile the person you loved and trusted with the person who could pull off such a long-term, calculated deception? Anger just simmered under the surface, all the time. Anger at him for his lies, for his hypocrisy, for the sheer nerve of calling me irresponsible. Anger at myself too, for being so trusting, so naive. How could I have missed the signs? Was I just willfully blind? This self-doubt was like acid, eating away at my confidence. I questioned my own judgment, my ability to see things clearly. If I could be so wrong about this, about him, what else was I wrong about? Resentment built a wall between us. Every interaction was strained, every shared memory now viewed through the lens of his deceit. Was he lying then too? What else didn't I know? Intimacy, both emotional and physical, just crumbled. How could I be close to someone I felt like I didn't even know anymore? Someone who had so fundamentally broken my trust. There was shame too, surprisingly. Shame that our life was such a mess. Shame that I had to tell my family, my closest friends. Shame that I was now part of this enormous debt. His secrets became my burden, this heavy cloak I couldn't take off. Sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford. The nights were the worst, filled with racing thoughts, replaying conversations, imagining the future, a future that now looked terrifyingly uncertain. Anxiety became my constant companion, this knot in my stomach that never fully loosened. The stress was immense. It affected my focus at work, my patience with the kids, my overall health. I felt so isolated, even when I was around people. Who could truly understand this specific kind of betrayal? It felt like grief, like I was mourning the marriage I thought I had, mourning the man I thought he was. As the initial emotional storm started to quiet down a bit, replaced by this weary ache, I began to really wrestle with the why. Why would he do this? Why would a man who, on the surface, seemed to have it all, a loving family, a comfortable life, a respectable career, risk everything for a web of financial secrets? During our painful conversations, and later, as I started reading and trying to understand the psychology behind financial infidelity, some patterns started to make a little more sense, though none of them truly excused what he did. He talked about feeling immense pressure, mostly pressure he put on himself, to be the successful provider, the financial wizard his MBA supposedly made him. When some investments went south early on, instead of just admitting it, he tried to recoup the losses by taking even bigger risks, digging himself into a deeper and deeper hole. Shame was a huge factor. He confessed he couldn't bear the thought of me, or anyone, seeing him as a failure with money. There was also an element of control. By managing everything in secret, he kept this sense of autonomy, maybe even power, within the relationship, especially around finances. It's possible this need for control came from his own anxieties about money, maybe from his childhood experiences. Some research points to that. He admitted that keeping this part of his life separate felt, in a twisted way, like he was protecting me from worry, while also protecting his own ego from being scrutinized. Sometimes, financial secrets are a way of retaliating or come from deeper unhappiness in the relationship, but in our case, it seemed more tied to his personal demons, fear of failure, an unhealthy relationship with money, and this profound inability to be vulnerable and honest when he felt he wasn't living up to some idealized version of himself. He wasn't trying to maliciously hurt me, he claimed, but the impact was just as devastating. The secrecy itself became an addiction, a pattern that just got harder and harder to break the longer it went on. Understanding these motivations didn't lessen the pain of the betrayal, not really, but it did offer a sliver of context to an otherwise incomprehensible situation. It painted a picture of a man who was deeply flawed and struggling, rather than just a purely malicious deceiver.
But the damage was done. For weeks, I felt like I was drowning in a sea of shock, grief, and anger. I was a victim of his choices, a passenger in a car crash I didn't even see coming. Then, one morning, something just shifted. I looked at my children, their innocent faces, their complete dependence on their parents, and I realized I couldn't stay submerged. I had to fight, not just for them, but for myself. The turning point wasn't some dramatic, movie-style epiphany. It was a quiet, steely resolve that settled deep in my bones. I was tired of crying, tired of feeling helpless. He had made choices that profoundly affected my life, sure, but I could choose how I responded. I could choose to reclaim my financial and emotional well-being.
The first step was admitting the full reality of the situation, no matter how painful. The debt was real. The betrayal was real. The marriage, as I knew it, was over. Pretending otherwise, or hoping he would magically fix it all, just wasn't an option anymore. I realized that his accusation, that I was the irresponsible one, was a projection. It was his way of deflecting from his own massive irresponsibility. And in a strange way, that freed me. If he was so wrong about me in that regard, maybe I was stronger and more capable than he, or even I, had given myself credit for. That day, I made a promise to myself. I would not let his mess define my future. I would educate myself, I would take control, and I would build a new life, brick by painful, practical brick. It was the moment I stopped being a victim of his financial infidelity and started becoming the architect of my own recovery. The fear was still there, that cold knot in my stomach, but now it was accompanied by this flicker of determination. This was my life, and I was going to take it back. Deciding to reclaim my life was one thing, figuring out how to actually do it financially was a whole other beast. That $97,000 debt felt like a mountain. My very first practical step, even before I fully understood all the legal stuff, was to open my own bank account. Such a simple act, yet it felt monumental. For the first time in 15 years, my paycheck from my part-time nursing job went into an account that was solely mine. It was a tiny island of financial autonomy in a sea of shared disaster. Next, I gathered every single piece of financial paperwork I could find, the secret statements, our joint accounts, my own income, everything. I needed a clear picture, no matter how horrifying it was. Staying calm while doing this was a constant battle, but I knew yelling or getting emotional wouldn't make the numbers change. Then, I sought professional help. My sister connected me with a divorce attorney, and that was a sobering, terrifying, but absolutely necessary step. The lawyer explained the grim reality. In our state, I was likely on the hook for half of the marital debt, whether I knew about it or not. That news was a blow, but knowing the legal landscape was crucial. She started helping me navigate the complexities of separating our finances and protecting my interests as much as possible. At the same time, I booked an appointment with a nonprofit credit counselor. This was less about pointing fingers and more about damage control. We went through the debts one by one, looking at interest rates, minimum payments, and figuring out the best way to tackle them. It was overwhelming, but the counselor was so practical and non-judgmental, which was a lifeline. We started to put together a budget, my budget. It was incredibly tight, and it meant cutting back on almost everything, but it was a plan, a tangible path forward. I also insisted on total transparency from James about any remaining accounts or financial obligations. We, or rather I, with the lawyer's guidance, started the process of closing joint accounts and separating credit lines. It was a painful, tedious process, like trying to untangle a massive, knotted fishing line. Every signature, every phone call to a bank, was a reminder of the mess. We began having regular, structured money meetings, initially with a mediator, then just the two of us, though these were incredibly strained. The goal was simply to track expenses, monitor debt repayment for joint debts we were still sorting out, and make sure no new financial secrets were popping up, at least until the divorce was finalized and our financial lives were completely separate. These meetings were purely business, no trust or partnership, like there should have been. This journey is far from over. The debt still looms large, but taking these practical, concrete steps, however small, has given me a sense of agency that I desperately needed. I'm learning to manage money not just for myself, but for my children's future, and with every bill I track, every small saving I make, I feel a tiny bit stronger. The financial cleanup was daunting, but the emotional rebuilding felt like an even steeper climb. The betrayal had left deep scars, and I knew I couldn't navigate that alone. One of the first things I did was find a therapist. Talking to a professional, someone outside the situation who could offer unbiased support and coping strategies, was invaluable. She helped me understand that my feelings of anger, betrayal, and anxiety were totally normal responses to such a profound breach of trust. Therapy became my safe space to process the trauma, to grieve the loss of my marriage as I knew it, and to start to untangle my sense of self-worth from the wreckage of his deceit. I also leaned heavily on my close friends and my sister. Sharing my story, as painful as it was, helped me feel less isolated. Their support, their outrage on my behalf, their practical help with the kids, or just a listening ear, it was a lifeline. It's so important to turn to others for support during times like these. Journaling became a daily ritual. Pouring out my thoughts and feelings onto paper, completely unfiltered, helped me make sense of the chaos in my head. It was a way to confront the difficult emotions without judgment. Practicing self-care, which had always been at the bottom of my list, became a priority. Simple things, like making sure I got enough sleep, or at least tried to, eating healthily, and taking walks in nature, made a small but significant difference to my ability to cope. These weren't luxuries, they were necessities for my emotional survival. Forgiveness is a complex part of this journey. Forgiving James? That feels a long way off, if ever possible in the way people normally think of it, but I'm working on forgiving myself for not knowing, for trusting too much. My therapist reminded me that choosing to trust someone is not a flaw. His choice to betray that trust was his failing, not mine. Rebuilding my self-esteem is an ongoing process. His accusations of irresponsibility, combined with the shock of the discovery, had initially shattered my confidence. But as I started taking control of the finances, making decisions, and navigating this crisis, I began to see my own strength and resilience. Every small victory, every step forward, helps to rebuild that sense of capability. It's about focusing on what I can control and acknowledging the immense effort it takes to heal from such a deep wound. The path to emotional recovery is long, but I am committed to walking it, for myself and for my children. This entire nightmare has been a harsh, unwanted education, but through it, I've learned some pretty profound lessons. Lessons I hope can maybe help someone else. The biggest one? The absolute critical importance of financial transparency in a relationship. Trust is the foundation, and when it comes to shared lives and finances, that trust must be built on open, honest, and regular communication. No more assuming, no more just handing off all responsibility to one partner, no matter how smart they seem. I've learned that everyone needs to have a basic understanding of their own household finances. You don't need to be an expert, but you need to know where your money is, where it's going, what debts you have, and what your financial goals are as a couple. If I'd been more involved, asked more questions, insisted on seeing statements regularly, maybe this wouldn't have gotten so devastatingly out of hand. Regular financial check-ins, even if they seem boring or like they might start a fight, are essential. I've also learned about the sneaky nature of shame and how it can drive people to do desperate, deceptive things. While his shame doesn't excuse what he did, understanding its power helps make some sense of the senseless. It also really highlights how important it is to create a relationship where both partners feel safe enough to admit mistakes and vulnerabilities, financial or otherwise. Rebuilding my own financial life means setting clear boundaries. Moving forward, any future relationship will involve very explicit conversations about money values, habits, and expectations right from the start. I will always maintain a degree of financial independence. My own account, my own understanding, my own say. This experience has taught me about resilience. I found a strength I honestly didn't know I had. Facing this betrayal and its consequences head-on has been the hardest thing I've ever done, but I am doing it. Healing takes time, patience, and a willingness to really work through the pain. It's not a straight line. There are good days and really terrible days, but the commitment to rebuilding, to creating a secure and honest future for myself and my children, that's unwavering. And perhaps the biggest lesson is that while financial infidelity can shatter a marriage, it doesn't have to shatter the person. If you're watching this, and any part of my story hits home, if you felt that uneasy feeling, that flicker of doubt, or if you're currently dealing with the devastating aftermath of financial betrayal, please know you are not alone. Statistics show that financial infidelity is, unfortunately, pretty common. So many people, from all walks of life, go through this painful breach of trust. My message to you is this: trust your gut. If something feels off in your financial life with your partner, don't just brush it aside. Ask questions. Get clarity. You have a right to understand your shared financial reality. Don't let anyone make you feel irresponsible or silly for wanting to be informed and involved. If you've discovered financial infidelity, let yourself feel all the emotions: the anger, the hurt, the betrayal. They are completely valid, but don't let them swallow you whole. Seek support, whether it's from trusted friends, family, a therapist, or a financial advisor. There are resources out there to help you handle both the emotional and practical fallout. Remember, you are not to blame for someone else's deceit. Their choice to hide, to lie, that's a reflection on them, not on your worth or your intelligence. Take steps, however small they might seem, to regain control of your financial life and your emotional well-being. Open that separate bank account. Talk to a lawyer. Create a budget. These actions are empowering. This journey is incredibly difficult, I know, but it is possible to heal and to rebuild a life of integrity and security. Your story doesn't have to end with the betrayal. It can be the beginning of a new chapter, one where you are in control, informed, and empowered. You deserve transparency, respect, and honesty in your relationships, and you have the strength inside you to demand it and to build a future based on it. If this story resonated with you, or if you have your own experiences with financial challenges in relationships, please think about liking this video and subscribing to the channel. I'll be sharing more about my journey, the steps I'm taking, and what I'm learning along the way. If you feel comfortable, share your thoughts or general advice in the comments below. Let's try to support each other. And most importantly, if you are in a situation that feels unsafe or just overwhelmingly complex, please reach out to trusted professionals for help. There are people who want to support you. The road ahead for me is still long and honestly, pretty uncertain. Rebuilding from this kind of financial and emotional devastation isn't quick or easy. There are days when the weight of it all feels absolutely crushing, but there are also days when I see a glimmer of the future I'm fighting for, a future where I am financially independent, emotionally whole, and living a life built on truth and integrity. My husband's accusation that I was financially irresponsible was a cruel irony, wasn't it? But maybe, in some twisted way, it was the catalyst I needed to uncover a truth that, however painful, has ultimately set me on a path to genuine understanding and control over my own life. This journey started with a shocking betrayal, but I'm determined it will end with reclamation and strength. Thank you for listening to my story.